Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of A Cup of Joe. My name is Joe Escobedo, and with me today on the show is Nikki Taylor. Nikki is the Marketing Growth Strategy Director for Asia Pacific at UPS. Thanks so much for being on the show, Nikki.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, Nikki, so what has been your biggest professional achievement to date, and are you able to share how you're able to reach such a milestone?
Sure. Unfortunately, I have no big, massive professional achievement that I can hang my hat on. But because I've worked for a lot of companies that are zero-based budgeting and have a lot of work required to get that approval, I would say that's probably my biggest achievements is the project money I've managed to achieve when other people haven't in the past, and continue to try and pitch.
I hear you. It's the same case with my business. Are you able to share maybe some tips in terms of how you're able to obtain such funds?
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. I was very lucky because I was on the agency side before, so Carol helped me hone my pitching skills. It's definitely knowing my audience of who's going to give me the money as well. So, the stakeholder involved. Sometimes there can be multiple stakeholders, and sometimes, you go after different ones. It's really making sure that you educate them before you go to the pitch. A lot of the times, the things that we do in marketing are really different to what they're used to. Definitely tailoring it to their language. Some of the other tips I've used is playing regions against one another. I might admit, if I'm looking after South region and North region is doing this, I might highlight that we're falling behind internally, along with what obviously it will do to help us externally with our customers and our growth and our revenue. But I might build on that competitive side as well. So there's multiple tips, but the key one is explain it in layman terms. Make sure you start to see the information early, get as many people you can below them, above them, whoever's going to sign that money off on your side before you actually do the big pitch. So by the time it comes to it, they're excited about it and they're like, yeah, sure, here's the money.
No, I mean, so that's a very good point in terms of talked about educating, and I guess educating up as well, because a lot of times maybe senior leadership aren't familiar with a lot of stuff, that goes on in digital marketing, a lot of the terms like marketing automation, content marketing, and things like that. So yes, as you rightly said, putting it in layman's terms so they can understand it. I also love the tip about, striking a bit of competition, something I hadn't thought about in the past, but that's an excellent way, whether it's region versus region or, just to, like you said, get them excited about, a mini competition, but in a fun way, like you said. So that's a really, really good advice, Nikki. Thank you for that. Now, obviously, you have a very extensive career. Are you able to share maybe one of the challenges you faced and how you're able to overcome it?
Sure. I mean, one of the challenges I had was last year. We had a bit of a crisis situation in Bangalore when I was working at Google in the food team. And it really did blow up. Everyone from senior management on both sides were flying in from around the world. It was a perfect storm around Christmas, over Christmas. My boss had left. That position was vacant. And, when I look back in hindsight, I could have done a better job of pushing up the message or the difficulties we're having. But it's difficult when you're finding that balance, especially when you're marketing and you're working with operations. You don't want to step outside your lane. You don't want to escalate on someone when it's not really what you do. But in hindsight, I probably could have done a better job in communicating some of the situations that were happening on the ground. So some great learnings, a very difficult time.
Once again, I can relate to that. I spent my early years in crisis communications, developing crisis statements. Do you think post that, was there any kind of actions to prevent any such situations, or was that kind of like an ad hoc thing that just came up and you hope never happens again?
It was a little bit of both, but it did put it put a couple of things in place. Actually, one was even just travel policies that, we didn't have certain visas that we could jump on a plane and get to India with all the visa process. So things like that. But also, we really hadn't looked at our crisis comms plan and when to escalate in a couple of years. And there had been changes on all teams, and it really did need a proper review. And that's what happened afterwards. It was a lot tighter going forward. I know when they left, and I did hear, I obviously had left since then, but it did have a round two of a similar situation where they didn't find the underlying problem, but obviously they were in a better situation to manage people's expectations, communicate with more transparency, and therefore have less of an issue the second time round. So. that at least was a positive.
Absolutely. Now, Nikki, I know you're very, very passionate about things like marketing automation, particularly tools like Marketo. So maybe can you share a little bit what you see as the biggest challenge that marketers are facing using such platforms, and what are some of the tips that you've learned along the way?
Sure. So I've worked with a few companies now that have had, the current one, UPS uses Marketo. Others have used Click Dimensions. I've had people that work for me that have had Eloqua or HubSpot, all things like that. I think number one, what we face is that either marketing brings it in or someone else. And we're all so excited because here's this tool that's going to make it easy for us to push out our EDMs. It's going to do, triggers for us. It's going to be fantastic. And a fault on the marketers, it doesn't normally go up high enough with a sponsor high enough that has operations, legal, sales, all talking about what this means. And then all of a sudden we realize the tool doesn't work because it doesn't integrate with Salesforce that the salespeople are working on. It doesn't integrate with data wherever your data is sort of stored. And then all of a sudden, for example, the team I have now, they do a fantastic job, but they are literally taking out some of the data, processing like what Marketo would do and putting it back up for the next trigger. Because we're still slowly getting there, and it just takes a really long time. I've worked with companies. UPS has been around for hundreds of years. Kunalgal I worked with, I think, is celebrated 150 years a while ago as well. So they have really legacy systems that it's not just easy to flip a switch and say, okay, fine, we have to integrate now. It takes it's a huge project for IT to do. So a lot of times that's one of the biggest things when we do this. We get so excited, but we forget it has its integration. And then even not just from a technical standpoint, but from a when will I accept the lead and when will I take it over, and what is yours and what is mine between sales and marketing is also important. We have our thoughts and ideas, but they're not necessarily agreed on with sales until we discuss it. And then that's also different on a country, on a regional, and on a corporate level. It always is. So it's going through those nuances a lot to try and fine tune it. And, we are still going through it with UPS. I know with the previous companies I'm working on, they're still going through it. And then on top of that, there's the red tape. And I understand why there's red tape. A lot of large multinationals, we're talking hundreds of thousands of employees. We're not talking 20 or 30 or 50. We're talking hundreds of thousands. And, I have been in situations where I'm managing the region and someone on a local level pushes something out and you're like, oh my goodness. And then it goes all the way to the top and comes back down and you have to defend it. So I understand why corporate also has these mechanisms in place where they go, okay, on a regional level, you can do this much, but for the final decision and the final hitting of send, we're still going to control you. And I get that. And it's necessary. It's then working really closely with your counterparts that are in HQ to make sure that moves smoothly. So I'm really lucky. I have a good relationship with the head of international marketing, and she runs that team. So if I do have any issues where, we're starting to fall behind because we're one region of many, and then, a lot of EDMs and a lot of marketing comes out of the US more than the international side. So if I am having difficulties, I do just sort of escalate and raise up my hand and things are helped. But it is extremely difficult to be agile with that. And I think I'll talk about it later, but even especially for APAC, we have, for myself in UPS, I have 12 markets, and we're looking at China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand. So the languages are vast, right? And they're not the same. So you've got translation. Translation takes us a week because we do it through a tool, and then it has to be checked to make sure that the tool translated it correctly. Then you need legal. So then legal needs to sign off on it because, if we're putting offers out or things in the market, then legal need to sign off. And again, it's working on those timelines. Legal, they have to turn around quickly for us, and if it's urgent, they will help. But if not, they have other workload as well. So all of a sudden, your agile EDM that should take 1 or 2 days to go takes a good 2-4 weeks to go, because you've also got to pull the data and all that sort of stuff that goes in with the opt-in and regulations along the way there. So there's multiple facets that I think people underestimate when they start working with these and they get so excited. But I will say these tools, they are great. They give us the ability to test. On top of that, they give us the ability to at least have actions and triggers that hopefully, and sort of do at the moment, make our lives a little bit easier. And definitely on a tracking standpoint, on the reporting side, do help us on that side.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. And in terms of some of the challenges you talked about, a lot of times marketers get very excited because it's a new platform, think it's going to solve all their problems. And a lot of times, like you said, reality sets in. So do you think like having a plan, I don't think enough marketers do this, but like, do you think having a plan before you even purchase the platform, how it's going to work out, how the approval process is going to work out, how everything's going to be executed? Do you think that might be helpful from the get-go? Or do you see a lot of marketers doing that? Or it's kind of like you buy it and then you hope everything will work out thereafter?
Look, from what I've seen from a marketing standpoint, we do due diligence on what we know and we control. I think the lack is the forgetting to involve IT, because no one wants IT or procurement in because it makes it difficult, and you're a marketer and we know what we're doing type thing.
Yeah.
And also sales, getting them involved. And I do think it's key that you really have a senior leader as a sponsor, someone who is in the business side of things and very senior up, either board level or just below, that will have no marketing knowledge, but they will understand the tool is there for efficiencies and will help with the cross teams, because I think that's where the gap is. As marketers, we're good. We can put those plans into place. There'll be a few things that once we get into it, we go, oh, that's not sort of what reality is. But the bigger challenges come more when it's cross teams and, the platforms that we use and what that means from a standpoint.
Yeah, so no, I think that's a good advice in terms of having a senior leader be that advocate or be able to, work across the different functions and teams. Do you happen to know the name of the translation tool you just mentioned? Do you happen to know that? You mentioned a tool that, because you have all the different markets. I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah.
If you don't know, it's okay.
You are. No, my team tell me all the time. I want to say it's Amper. I can find out for you. It's something like Ampelade or something. My team mentioned it to me like literally yesterday when I was going through and I was going through again, reviewing the timelines because, just trying to bring it down and being more agile in this whole coronavirus situation. It's really brought out to light how unable we are to move quickly, and we've just drafted content and gone, oops, it's a bit late to send that out now. Let's wait and see if we can rework that content in a week's time, because we've missed the boat now.
Yeah.
So it sort of did highlight that we're a little bit not agile, and one of them was, I think it's Amper something. I can find out, but yeah, it's a specific tool.
All good. I think, that's the reason I'm bringing it up is I think a lot of marketers, especially doing work across different regions like Asia Pacific, we have so many languages that, not only localization, but translation becomes a bigger challenge. So if there's a tool, once again, we'll try to find it, add it somewhere in the notes. Thank you for that, Nikki. Now, obviously, you give a very good overview in terms of the challenges and ways to address marketing automation. How does content marketing play a role? You touched on it earlier in terms of your marketing automation efforts.
Yeah, so we try to take the approach. We have three main CRM programs that we run. One is new customers, one is for growth, and one is for inactive customers. And we really look at the content of what might be relevant as part of their journey. So for new customers, we obviously send them a welcome email, and that we can do to everybody because it's considered transactional. So legal is okay whether they're opted in or opted out. But after that, then it just goes into our opted in track. And we find that obviously for new customers, we want to make them aware of some of the tools, some of the free tools and the value added services that we offer to make it easier for them to ship with UPS. And that's also gives that creates that stickiness. So we have a program that goes for 6 months. A lot of it is around some of those key issues that you have. So we know that one of the key problems they have is how to read their invoice or their billings. One is about how to create their first shipment. Some are, tools that we have that help them track and trace, like My Choice. Others are, when it comes up to brokerage, we know that ends up being one of the areas that they're a little bit unsure of when they're a new shipper. So definitely for new customer, the content marketing is a lot more product specific. But when we go into growth is really about engaging and nurturing them. They've stayed with us for 6 months, so they do ship with us. And we have seen that if we engage with them every 2 months, that they ship more frequently and a higher volume with us than those that don't, through our test versus control. And we've just actually reviewed that and looked at changing it a little bit, because we feel for the growth people, they don't want to hear about our products. If it's, there's some that we're going out again at the moment with coronavirus to remind people of how they could help. But in general, for growth, what we're trying to do is more about what's happening, what's trends, or things like, a lot of things that come up that help people are FTAs. If they know more about that, it can help them ship and it can give them a leg up on their competition. Other things, so for example, Earth Day is coming up, so we probably have some information around that, and carbon neutral, sustainability, things that they might be interested in that relates to what we do at UPS, or how we help on the logistics side of things, or the trends, but also would be of value to them. So that's definitely the content we create there. And then we have more ad hoc campaigns. So if we have, obviously we have key messages with our business objectives that we're trying to push, and we look at it from a PR side, but also from a content marketing side as well. So then leveraging what that is, and some of them on our PR team, they do really big white papers in conjunction with a research agency around e-commerce, also around industrial industries as well. So we definitely share them and let people aware. And then it can be, other things now, like what's happening with coronavirus, especially being an essential service and still being open, but also there's a lot of changes happening at the moment, and changes in the supply chain. So, we're sort of tailoring some of our content where possible to that, if we can get it fast enough out.
Got it. So just to recap, it sounds like there's a couple of different things in addition to the product one. I'm glad you brought up, I think a lot of organizations think, all the customers do is sleep and eat and dream about their products and services, which is not necessarily the case a lot of the times. So you talked about two different types of, valuable content, one of which was more like evergreen content. So how to read invoices and things like that. And then there's the more, I guess, topical ones, or things that are trending. So whether it's Earth Day or coronavirus or things like that. So having a combination, I guess, and using that within your nurturing programs. Okay. Very, very, very interesting. And you touched on it a couple of times, but we spoke about this before. How are you really assessing the success of your initiatives? I know you have a very interesting way. Share with the
Yeah, so UPS, I must admit, is a great organization that is very robust in its planning, not just to get budget, but they track how successful each campaign or project is. And especially for marketing, one of the new ways that we are going is what we call test versus control. So we take a small numbers that basically do not get sent EDMs or do not get exposed to the content. And they're measured against, that's the control group, and that's measured against the test. And so it all goes out, and then afterwards we can have a look and see, okay, for the two, what was the difference? Because argument comes up all the time, and I'm sure you've heard it. Well, what if I just did nothing? There would still be some people that ship. There would still be some people that would find my website. And the answer is yes, there would, but there would be a big difference in the number that actually did. And so the test versus control helps to prove that. So it shows people that, okay, so you did nothing. And the great example we had is with the growth one. It's like, okay, so here's the sample of the growth for 6 months. We didn't send them anything. Okay, and this is their revenue, and this is how much they shipped, and this is their average shipment that they did. And this is the test group where we actively went out and engaged them 3 times during that 6 months. Their revenue is higher, their volume is higher, their average per piece is higher. So therefore, we can conclude that what we're doing is working and working better. The next step that they're going into is actually measuring test versus control incrementally year on year. To basically see, okay, you started a plan and that's what you did, and that's great. Have you bettered your plan? So are you improving your plan? Are you improving your programs as you go along? So it gets even harder on us. But it definitely is a good method in showing, what is working, what is not. There's some limitations, and we do have some discussions around it. So for example, our new customers, we're concerned about having a test versus control all the time, because we really do want to engage with them being new, and they have a more propensity to churn if they're not. Yeah. But we do understand there needs to be a benchmark. So we're looking at the same approach of the US of setting a benchmark of doing it for at least a year to be able to establish something before we can sort of separate them out and say, okay, now we can go back in and we can apply the sort of numbers we had in the previous year. The other downside you have with test versus control and where we've pulled back is sometimes you don't have a very large number to do for test versus control. Definitely in some of our markets, we don't have high opt-in rates. So actually trying to take out a test versus control, especially, you know, for new customers, we pull that data on a weekly basis. So it can be very small. So it doesn't make sense for us to do test versus control. And the same with some of our ad hoc ones. If we're doing an ad hoc one, it's going to a small group. We don't recommend, and we you know, discuss with corporate that it's not viable to do a test versus control. But where we have large numbers, it does seem the right approach.
It's an interesting way. Like I said, I haven't seen too many organizations do it that way. I think the people watching in market research firms will definitely get very excited hearing about this, because that's how they've done it forever. But I said it's not a lot that happens on the brand side that you know, you have that test control. And I guess at the end it goes back to what you talked about earlier in terms of getting budgets. I imagine that those kind of tests and you can say, look, we've run it for this period. Here's the results versus, you know, the control group and so on, and then here's the additional revenue or account size and so on. So I imagine that helps out to some extent with your, you know, trying to get
yeah. It does. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the good example is, you know, we have the inactive customer program. Because we don't have large opt-in on some of them, we do still do direct mails, and we do vouchers and we do promo codes. And the question has always been, because the large budget goes to direct mail, you know, can we cut that? And same with the vouchers, can we cut that? And even I challenged that when I first started, and my manager went away and she said, oh, I need to test it first because I have a feeling that we can't do this yet. And fair enough, test versus control came back actually in some of the markets, not all. And that's the thing, she identified the markets where it works and where it doesn't. In some of the markets, the direct mail performed better than the EDM. And in some markets, the vouchers performed better than the promo code. Not in all, but then we can start to tailor on a local side and saying, okay, in these markets in South Asia, we don't have to do DM anymore. We can cut that budget. It didn't work. In these ones in the North, we still need to keep it in because it really does bring the revenue in. But we continue to test, do test versus control and different groups to see how we can fine tune it going forward. Because ultimately we do want to not have to put as much budget in that. But if it's still a good tactic, not going to change it.
Yeah.
That's where it really is valid, because, you know, I questioned it, corporate questioned it, and then the results come back, and actually I said last year, put more money in.
Put more money in.
So, you know, it can do. Well, we had a bit left out. I was like, you know what, that's a better ROI than some of the other tactics. So, you know, let's get that up and let's try and get a later push in the revenue because we weren't meeting plans. So yeah, I mean, all these things help. And I mean, you obviously have to factor in seasonality. You have to factor in issues like coronavirus and things like that. And that really does happen. And I know with a lot of our campaigns, even though we are probably more actively working than other companies, we work with some agencies when it comes to paid and social, and, you know, they have been really good with giving us reports of sentiments in like Singapore and Malaysia of, you know, should we be stopping because people are really not going to be listening, or based on you being in logistics, it's still a good time, you know. And it depends what our objective of the campaign has been as to being whether we've paused or we've kept going. So it's, yeah.
It's interesting to hear about the direct mail, because I think a lot of times marketers, you know, we think about, you know, what's the new technology? How can we incorporate AI or machine learning into it? And you're saying, look, in some markets, you know, direct mail actually outperforms in terms of revenue generation. So it's interesting, the test, the way it kind of, you know, proves or disproves kind of what our notions are around digital marketing.
It is. I mean, my goal is still to increase my opt-in emails. Don't get me wrong. That is always my goal. Yes. But in light of that, yeah, it's amazing what some tactics still work.
Absolutely. Now you talked about a couple different things in terms of the customer journey. But how are you integrating kind of what we talked about just now, the CRM and kind of your content into the overall customer journey?
Okay, so I look after 3 teams, so PR, customer comms, and social. The digital team, which have our own digital channels, being the ups.com. Also, they do search and digital, and then obviously the CRM team. So we look at how we can get that message across everywhere. And some things I control on a regional level with budgets, some things I don't. Definitely our own channels, being ups.com, we look to amplify it through our web banners. And we use tools like Adobe Segment and Adobe Audience, so we can actually track, and we are able to match them through revenue that we get from people that click on our banners that are promoting our key message that we're trying to get, or our promo codes, or if we're trying to get them to download one of the ebooks we've produced. So we can actually measure that, which is really great, and we can actually map it back to the revenue in the end of if they shipped. We always do a 30-day attribution. So we look at our banners, they do really, really well. There's also other pages on the website. So the banner is the main one, and we're just going to launch a different style. So we're not going to have the 3 rotating round. It will be 1 main one and then 3 down the bottom, which is great. And they're looking at making it more experience orientated as well. So if you're tagged as a healthcare person, I can specifically change up your banner to show what I want to show you. So we're moving in that direction, which is really, really fantastic. Then on top of that, there's a couple of other pages. We know these messages, especially if we have a promo code, really work well. So if we're trying to get you to ship and we've got a promo code for you, calculate time per cost, calculate time and cost, and also the shipping page, when you click on it, tend to do really well. And those ones are really tiny. You just see it up at the top, but it's just a reminder what the code is along with the other ones. So we've tried to seed it wherever we can. With paid search, we have paid search in a few markets, and we've tested out a few ways of doing it. So we have always on, and we do find our generic messages do tend to do better than promos, or if we product sell. So we try to stay away from products, because people don't know what our product names are. They don't. So we really have to be descriptive. And our always on tend to do better than our promos. So if we do have a promo, we put a little bit money into having it separate, but we do a lot of the times use the extension. So, the sublines of the search that you can see, and they tend to do okay as well. We have display sometimes, and then, if we've got budget for that, we will look to amplify on that. We work with a local agency for organic social. So that's another area that we always try to amplify. And I guess we definitely, because it's organic and it's social, we try to be more on the content side of that. So we will occasionally put in things like promo codes and stuff like that. And occasionally, if we've got a product that we're launching, we'll have it in there. But majority of the posts are leading to our overall key messages that we're trying to push. So if we're focused on building up reputation for Europe trade lane or intra-Asia, we'll have content around that. If we're trying to build up around a specific content product, we'll look at, well, what does that mean? What are the pain points? What content would work well to sort of lead people in there? Or your general ones, and then like other people have on social media, other things like that as well. But we look at a 360 approach of what do we have on our own channels? What can we do on the PR side? Obviously then, some of them get bigger again, so then they can have press releases or bylines when it comes into content marketing. Sometimes we have webinars that link into some of our campaigns. So that goes on a whole other side, because they're very good at that and they think through their stories. So we try to do as much as we can across all of them with the limited budgets that we get.
That sounds like you have a lot on your plate given those limited budgets, for sure. So we talked about doing a lot of work across Asia, and you talked about some of the tactics that have worked for you guys based on the testing. Maybe can you share a couple examples of some of the initiatives that have worked across Asia for you?
Sure. So I think coming into China, so China is one of our biggest markets, and recently from last year embarked on really enhancing the WeChat channel, the official channel, and bringing it not just on par with our competitors, but above them. And we're continuing to go up and compete against the local sides. But we were sort of waiting for WeChat Pay before we really went out big. We had a couple of tests last year where we really did look at the WeChat moment ads. And I'm going to say it's phenomenal money that goes in there as a marketer who's used to zero budgeting. But because they're so targeted, the amount of traction you get and feedback is amazing as well. And I will say, it took the China team a while to convince me they wanted a key influencer, a KOL, and that style, and not a traditional logistics one, and a very different style being China. And it took them a couple of times to walk me through it to get my head around it, because I need to pitch it and then still be able to back them and explain it to corporate. And there was quite a few I'm like, I don't get it, maybe because I'm old. But we finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I get it, and yeah, let's see how this goes. And the amount of engagement they got through that, it was phenomenal. And I was like, really? Because it was so long and you had to flip through all of that. I was like, I wouldn't waste my time, which is normally my sort of test. Would I flip? Would I stay? What would I do? Is normally my test when I'm looking at stuff. But China is so different. You really do have to listen and leverage to your local team. And if you don't get it, just take the time for them to sit down and explain it to you, because they do know it better than we do. And it's just totally different. Vietnam's still testing out. A lot of people say, and we've tested a little bit, but not a lot, is that we do feel that social does better than search and sort of display there. We don't have sort of a lot of testing being done there. I'm hoping that we can do that this year, because a lot of assumptions, and in my peer network, it's always sort of come round. And in previous companies, my local marketing manager has always been an advocate of social over search in Vietnam. So I guess that's one I look at, and hopefully we'll definitely test and find out. I think it depends on your business. So for our business, our markets are stronger in North Asia. So we typically do better with our tactics when it comes to search, and more direct, I guess, on the north side. So Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China. Versus, I think, on South District, it's more education needed, more brand awareness needed. One, for where the company is, but I'd say even when I was working at other companies, I think the South District, if you're not well known in places in Thailand and Vietnam, you do have to put the effort into brand awareness, what you stand for, and educating them and making sure you're on the channels that they really listen to. And obviously in their local market as well. So those are some of the challenges I find across all our markets. Yeah.
I think it's interesting to bring up kind of the maturity or level of awareness that different markets have about a company. I think, like you said, that dictates in a way your content, or at least how you approach things. Let's talk about North Market. The market is more mature in terms of their awareness of kind of what you guys do. So you can get away with kind of more product, maybe more transactional type of content. Whereas, you said in Southeast or South Asia, you're doing more educational, because obviously you don't have that awareness. You're trying to educate them in terms of, it's always that first step. And I'm glad you brought up education. I see as a common theme about what you do, whether it is educating to get buy-in, or whether it's educating a new market to better understand not only products and services, but also be that kind of that value giver that you guys are talking about. We talked about the different types of content in terms of transactional and evergreen, evergreen and kind of topical. So I'm excited to hear that kind of education plays a key role in what you're doing, not only inside the organization and outside the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. For sure.
Well,
yeah, I think that's one of the key, I was just going to say, that's one of the key differences we have. And a lot of people talk about how do you take corporate plans and, how do you localize them? And a lot of the time, especially for UPS, their brand is actually very different. And what they offer in the US is different to Asia Pacific. We typically, people think of UPS, they think about the van and the local deliveries. We don't really do that in Asia. We are cross-border, we're on the planes. We do have the vans on a couple of markets, but not to the extent that the US does. And the same as with Kuehne + Nagel. Some of those products and services that you offer are different, and where your brand presence is known. And definitely, I think that's the difference when you're working for a multinational, whether the home country is, the brand is normally known. It's not an issue. So when you're fighting for budget and saying, I'm in Asia, no one knows what we are. Sometimes the companies I work for, they can't even pronounce the name. You're like, I need to have a bit more of, brand presence out there. I know it's difficult to give an ROI, but it is so important for people to understand what you do and want to work with you, at least have a conversation with you, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. I think it helps if, those overseas leaders can come down and better understand like the level of awareness, because you're absolutely right. If it's, European or or US based, usually the brand is very, very strong. And so you can't make the assumption that, it's going to be the same in different parts of Asia, because generally it's not. Because they have that story, they have that long history that, over the years you get to better understand them. If you're just entering a market, I think good tip is to never assume that your audience knows more than they do, particularly about your company, your products and services. So really, really good takeaway.
Absolutely.
Nikki, like I said, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed today's interview and you sharing your experience. So thank you for that. How can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about what you're doing and so on?
Yep, sure. They can find me on LinkedIn. So Nikki Taylor 156 at LinkedIn. They can reach out to me there and just let me know that they heard me through Cup of Joe.
Yes, wonderful. Please do that. Well, thank you so much again, Nikki. And if you enjoyed today's interview, please feel free to share it with others who might find it helpful, and leave any comments in there, so we'll hopefully help address those. Otherwise, thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, everyone that's watching, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.
Thanks, Joe. Bye.